Never ask a man his salary, a woman her age, or a Stranger Things fan what the hell was going on with the military subplot in any given season. It's nice to know that 9 years later, some things never change. There's still a foreboding monster. Its grand scheme is still looming over the happy-go-lucky town of Hawkins, which is still somehow happy-go-lucky, even after it got demon earthquaked into oblivion in Season 4. Don't try not to remember that. There's still a really, really excellent soundtrack by Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein, which somehow manages to be both nostalgic and refreshing. And I think most importantly, there's an ever-growing ensemble of Hawkins locals who are as endearing as ever, and I'm always itching for just one more scene with each of them to explore a different dynamic. For that one more new dynamic to be played with so I can discover just how much I like it. For one more bit of charming banter that just makes you warm up to these characters you didn't know that you liked so much. I think, above all, the final season of Stranger Things will be remembered for its characters and what it gave to them, both in their arcs and in their endings. Yes, there were a lot of bumps in the road and many moments that might make you do a double take or scratch your head if you think about them too long, but at the end of the day, this is a long-running television series first and foremost. And those kinds of TV series are fundamentally a vessel for you to fall in love with the characters they show you in each episode. Yes, Stranger Things also happens to contain larger-than-life plots, sci-fi demons and dimensions, and more fantastical elements than you or the Stranger Things writer's room can keep track of. But at its core, it was always about a group of four friends who lost one of their core pieces, and on their way to finding that piece again, picked up another, and 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 another. Anyway, the relationships and characters were what made so much of the world fall in love with some random Netflix streaming series nearly a decade ago. And they're what made people keep coming back season after season. People came back for Mike and Eleven. People came back for Steve's growth into a father figure and his dynamic with Dustin. People came back for the group taking in Max from a troubled home and to watch Max grow into a now fan favorite character. People came back for the Byers family, struggling each and every season to find some semblance of connection and normalcy in the new reality that they had to navigate. People came back for the found families, both big and small. They came for Hopper and Eleven and their tragic undertones. They came for Robin and Steve and their growing bond. They especially came for when the entire group eventually found its way back together at the very end for each season finale. Even though in that same finale, the show would inevitably and always brutally murder a new fan favorite without fail every single time. So yes, the Mind Flayer was a fascinating evolution in Season 2, one which grew Will Byers as a character, and yes, Vecna quickly became a captivating and iconic villain, thanks in no small part to Jamie Campbell Bower's iconic performance. And yes, everyone was always curious to know what was really going on with the Upside Down. People are always keen for a mystery and a new unknown element to be introduced. That's what gets everyone's foot in the door. But what gets them to stay and to revisit each season and to keep viewers coming back are the characters. And Season 5, for its many faults, never truly failed its characters. Each of them stayed true to the people we'd known they were for the past near decade. Each of them got a bookend that was not only fitting for them, but satisfying and bittersweet for us as viewers. Even with an ensemble that was growing in size to compare to the mass of the Mind Flayer itself, Stranger Things found a way to make time for all of them and their own endings within its final episode. The denouement was long, yes, but I can't think of another epilogue that went on for so many minutes with me being glued to the screen for each and every one of them. Good or bad, that's the power that these characters and the fondness and nostalgia we collectively gain for them as a viewership have now. It's impressive, no doubt, but I do want to touch on the shortcomings I've mentioned in regards to Season 5. This will be a bit list-like just to get through it, but here goes. Linda Hamilton had effectively zero impact on the story. This goes for most of the military at large. They could have paid off the subplot with using the sonic weaponry against Vecna, maybe, or something. It could have been an interesting way to raise the capabilities of the non-powered members of the party who make their way to the Abyss in the finale if they get their hands on this weaponry, but no. Or even, team up to destroy the world-ending threat, but maybe call a truce. No, don't have time for that. Further, the mix of military and the Upside Down was largely nonsensical, both within and outside of the narrative. Within the narrative, their presence removes almost all sense of tension and danger from the Upside Down, making it feel more like an unpopulated backrooms type of setting than a dangerous realm that exists solely to harm its trespassers. Gone was the fear associated with the space itself from Seasons 4 and prior. Outside of the narrative, the same faults can be found, but this situation now also creates a confusing view of the military for the viewer. They're competent enough to commandeer the Upside Down, but also sloppy enough to get dogged on in every encounter with the main characters, as well as by literally any Demogorgon or Demodog, but apparently they didn't have that problem with the Demobats. The inconsistency builds and can ruin the immersion in certain scenes as well. Beyond that, the time skips were kind of hard to get behind. I understand they likely did this because of how long they took in between the actual filming of the seasons, but honestly, the logistics of it being nearly 2 years in quarantine was a huge struggle for me, especially when there was such an immediate sounding cliffhanger at the end of season 4. Like, what even happened with that? I understand they were crawling for all this time in between seasons, or whatever, but how in the hell was Vecna taking so much time to do everything he began doing once the season had begun? Again, I get it. Some of the cast looks so much older in season 5 than in season 4. That's pretty hard to handwave, but maybe don't take so fucking long between seasons next time, guys. You're literally the biggest series in the world, arguably. I'm sure you could have made it happen. Also, and this is more of a Netflix problem, but it is becoming very, very obvious that a lot of scenes are expressly written to be viewed by people who are scrolling on their phones. I also had viewed in air quotes there in the script. Literally everything gets verbalized and explicitly spelled out word for word. For people who are not partially brain dead and are actually capable of paying attention to a television show, this gets genuinely painful at times. I found this happening a lot in the first volume of episodes, one such example being when Mike and Eleven are on top of the Squawk building having their heart-to-heart conversation, where they essentially just recap and narrate everything that we've seen over the past 15 minutes, just stating it word for word. In the back half, all of this was a little bit less apparent, but after like half a dozen explain the plan scenes in the collective second batch of episodes, I was starting to feel it again in volume 2. And lastly, I think the writing and direction was considerably weaker this season. I am very much aware that every member of this cast is capable of delivering standout scenes and having standout performances. However, it is up to the script to make those scenes possible and make them exist, and then up to the directors to bring each actor into the right space to do these things. For one reason or another, it felt like a lot of the cast were let down in this way during the season. One very obvious example I see online is Will. I understand he is a stilted individual as a character, and that Noah Schnapp may not be the most talented member of the cast, but he was and still is capable of having excellent scenes. Whenever he went emotionally intense, one example obviously being his coming out scene, he was awesome, but a lot of his more reserved scenes fall incredibly flat. To me, this is not the sign of a bad actor, but of a production which did not properly aim and mold this actor. And the proof of this can be found by looking at scenes which do not involve Will or Noah Schnapp, because Noah Schnapp's inconsistency is not an isolated incident. Return to my criticism of the scene of Mike and Elle atop the Squawk. Straight up, what the fuck are Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown supposed to do with that dialogue? What is Noah Schnapp supposed to do with his dialogue, where every time he is connecting to the hive mind, he has to speak in the vaguest half sentences for 30 seconds or more, just for the sake of building up tension to the viewer? This is not on the actors. They are doing their best. In most cases, they are actually the victims. How exactly are Caleb and Finn and Maya supposed to deliver cringy-ass dialogue about the dick tunnel when they're referencing The Great Escape? How is that supposed to sound good? The problem even impacts Jonathan and Nancy, as half of their relationship argument scenes are incredibly cliched and feel as if they've been written by a 6th grader. The dialogue is so basic and direct that it starts to feel like second screen writing yet again, as if they're trying to explain directly to the audience to catch them up on their relationship issues in case they haven't been paying attention. The talents of Natalia Dyer and Charlie Heaton are simply no match for the lines they are given and how they were directed to speak those lines. I mean, yeah, some cast members got lucky or were able to simply brute force their ways through. Thankfully, the material for Dustin and Steve is nuanced enough that they never had to deal with this issue, and this is the same for almost every scene around the Holly Wheeler subplot, but damn, this issue hits some relationships really, really hard. Hopper and Elle can be positively brutal at times in the first volume of episodes. The entire military cast too, which is a shame for Linda Hamilton because she is very talented and, I understand, a fan of the show. Thankfully though, this issue was much less prevalent in the season's second half. As we got closer and closer to the end, the cast was finally able to really elevate, and almost everyone got some incredible standout scenes once they finally had actual good material to work with. I mentioned Will's big moment, but Noah and Jamie were also incredible in the scene where Vecna was nearly redeemed. Huge props to the entire Wheeler family cast as well. Natalia Dyer brought the heat with Charlie during Nancy and Jonathan's big argument and catharsis in the Hawkins lab. Nell Fisher was perhaps my favorite performance of the season. She was a fantastic Holly. Outside of the family, Sadie Sink hit as always. She really sold Max's coming back, her being trapped in the mind, and she did a fantastic job in her scene motivating Holly, even though that went on for like forever. They had a great dynamic. Robin and Will's chemistry, I thought, worked very well this season too, thanks in no small part to Maya Hawke. And David Harbour was also great in the finale when he had to handle Vecna in his mind. And obviously, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, Winona Ryder was also amazing, even though she didn't get a ton to do. But to me, the stuff that hit the hardest this season was Steve and Dustin. Kiri and Matarazzo absolutely knocked it out of the park with their huge fallout and their subsequent reconciliation. They've consistently been a standout dynamic of the show, and this season was no exception. Honestly, the Duffer Brothers struck gold with this, and I'm so glad they realized it and kept at it. Okay, with the season as long as this, I could talk for a long time, and I already have, about everything I loved or that just made me happy or remember the journey this series and these characters have been on. I'd be here all day. I'll wrap it up by saying that the show always manages to surprise me. The Hawkins lab action sequences were a new kind of fun and stressful that I didn't know the show could still be capable of. I also really appreciated my Henry Creel lore, even if it did kind of come out of nowhere. Lucas and Mrs. Wheeler were tremendously clutch at various moments throughout the season, and I really did value that at least some effort was made to make everyone useful in a somewhat reasonable way during the final fight. Sure, it makes like zero sense whatsoever that bullets have any effect at all on the Mind Flayer given how they impact Demogorgons, but honestly at that point, whatever. Main characters, I get it. There was a fire too. One could reasonably interpret the effect of the bullets as distraction for the Mind Flayer, and the fire and the stabbing as what's doing the real damage there. I just wish there were maybe some other monsters in the Abyss dimension. It seemed rather empty. I could understand maybe they all got absorbed to make the giant meat Mind Flayer, but still, like, it's literally empty. And finally, it felt very appropriate that Will and Eleven and Joyce were the people who did serious and permanent damage to Vecna. That was very well deserved. Anyway, that's it for me. Stranger Things Season 5 is getting a 3.5 out of 5 stars and a definite recommendation. Either you are seeing how it all ends because the show has been a part of your life like it's been a part of mine, or you've been living under a rock and should experience the series in full finally. Either way, get watching. I'm sure that maybe I'm being a bit too generous with my rating as well, but I am aware of that, and maybe now you are aware of that too, at least. It's hard to look at the end of something such as Stranger Things, which I essentially grew up with, and give it an unbiased point of view. Like I said, I have a soft spot for every single character in this show, no matter how many they happen to be introducing, but I think that alone says a lot about the space Stranger Things has been able to occupy in each of us individually, as well as in our collective culture. I'd happily tune in for a spin-off, just, maybe not Els. So check it out, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below, and feel free to tell me I'm a jackass for being too harsh or going too easy on the final season. Maybe what this really comes down to is that I'm just happy it wasn't another Game of Thrones situation. Because honestly, even if the plot mechanics themselves aren't perfect, what we remember and what we think about when it comes to Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, like I said, are the characters. And the characters stayed true to themselves until the very end. They were either rewarded or had fitting conclusions. What we came to know of them and what we came to expect from them wasn't suddenly pulled away in the final season for a cheap twist or something that doesn't even fit who they have come to be as people. At the end, I think that's what really matters, and that's what will give this show staying power, potential weakness of the finale notwithstanding. So yeah, that's all I have to say for this one. Until next time.